Thanks for coming to the talk. I'm happy to be here at Fragsgiving. I've never been out here before, so I'm excited. Let's see. How come that's not working? Oh, I know what it is. I got it. There, see? There we go. My name is Richard Ross. I like octopuses. This is my daughter when she was little. She was very hungry. This is the three of us, my nuclear family. We take Halloween way too seriously. And currently, I'm a co-host of the Reef Beef podcast. It was the podcast that's been voted the #1 vulgar language reef-keeping podcast by Vulgar Language Reef-Keeping Podcast Today. This is my reef tank. This was about a year ago. I gave it a big haircut recently. It's a 150-gallon tank, and it is known for having high phosphate and nitrate. The whole system in my house extends all over the house. This is my secret home lab that I've used for various things, like raising this never-kept-before species of octopus, wonderpus, metasepia, which I have right now, flamboyant cuttles, Dr. Seuss fish. I also was the lead on the 212,000-gallon tank. It's a reef tank at the California Academy of Sciences for about 10 years. And here's a couple other systems that I've set up and what they've looked like. And I show them to you because this talk is about how I do things, and I do the same thing for everything. By the way, I was also the first person in the United States to spawn acropora coral in tanks. And I did that initially at the Academy, and now I do it in my house in the Secret Home Lab. It's called the Secret Home Lab because that sounds funnier than the spare room. But coral spawning is very, very cool, especially for acros. I got this piece of footage. Let's see if it runs. Yeah, and this was pretty much the only piece of footage I was looking after for the last 8 years, so I give up everything now. That's not true at all. I'm expecting the spawning either next week or in early December. And, you know, babies start like that, and then they grow up. This, in particular, is the F2. So this is, we collected some gravid corals, we spawned them, I raised the babies, they grew up, I spawned them, and we have this. I only got one to go through of this species last year, but it's growing like crazy, and they should spawn again December 10th, if everything is what it should be. And like I say, I do the same thing for all of these different animals. Nothing is really different. And so I believe, we'll go through a few things. I believe that the best first reef tank you can have is small because you can easily be successful by doing huge water changes regularly. If there's a problem, do a huge water change. If it's Tuesday, do a huge water change. If it's the next Tuesday, do a huge water change. You will fix 90% of problems as you learn how to reef. I believe a big sump helps reef be successful because it increases the water volume and it gives it a place for detritus to settle out in your tank. I believe that most reef equipment is pretty good, and chasing after the best equipment is generally not worth doing. I believe children are the future. I believe seeded rock is the foundation of successful reef tanks. Dry rock, wild rock, whatever kind of rock you want to use. I think you need to seed it for a few months. If it's wild, you're letting bacterial turgor push out all the goo that's in the rock. If it's new, you're letting it bring in new bacteria. So it's wonderful and helpful. And I think if you do this several months before you set up your tank, your life will be happier and easier. I believe benthic succession is your friend and is often ignored by reef keepers. Benthic succession is the life that grows on the benthos, on the substrates over time. Rock is not supposed to be white once it's got living stuff in it. It's only white because it's been dead and cleaned. So your rock, you can see as these were put in this tank a week apart. Was it 2 weeks? It was a week or 2 weeks. Same frag plug. So the first one is the darkest one. Oh wait, I have a pointer because people don't know what I'm pointing at. This was put in first, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then this one was brand new. So I think it's a week apart. That's what it looks like after about 2 months. That's what your rock is supposed to look like. It's not supposed to be white. We see a lot of people nowadays saying, you know, my My rock is going brown or green. It's like, yeah, it's supposed to be brown or green. Unless you don't want it, but then you're doing something different. I believe slowly ramping up your lighting over the first month or two of your reef tank will help avoid the uglies. I believe mechanical filtration is highly overrated and generally not needed in most reef aquariums. I believe in water flow and feeding because our animals have mouths, and flow is more important than water. Oh, I think this is a video. Yeah. So that's me feeding, and that's a bunch of flow. And that's just like 1/5 of the feed that I do every 2 or 3 days. I believe nitrate and phosphate are not responsible for excess algae growth. Fight me. I believe equipment doesn't equal experience or understanding. I believe that if you want a stable aquarium, stop messing with it so much. Leave it alone and let it do its thing. I believe in auto water changes. I believe my dad can beat up your dad. I believe there are no magic bullets, even though we all, including me, desperately want there to be magic bullets. I believe that understanding a range is better than chasing a particular number. So for pH, don't go for 8.3, go for 8.1 to 8.4. For salinity, don't go for 34, go for 33.5 to 35. For alkalinity, I don't care if my tank is between 8 and 9 DKH. I just think the range is what you care about, plus your test kits are all wrong anyway. I believe the better is the enemy of good in reef tanks, and that good leads to stability, and chasing the better doesn't. I believe that you should check your sources and verify your claims, or claims that people made. This is a fake product. This is a fake product, and right here it says, this is a fake product. We put this out, and immediately we were getting requests for how to get this product. It is a fake product that says it is a fake product. If you read it, it's a whole thing. There's a video of it available online. I believe the time to prepare for disaster is now. Right now, before you have a disaster. This is someone's burned down tank. They didn't prepare enough for disaster. I believe that setting up your system to make tasks easy will make it more likely you will do those tasks. I know it feels exciting now to be testing your water every 2 days and to be getting on your knees under your sump to deal with the frags that are under there, but I guarantee you after 10 years it will be less fun. Make it easy so you can do it. And I believe that Joe Waiula Mice's favorite vodka is delicious. I also believe in benign neglect. If this is like my core principle, we spend all this time and all this kinds of discussion talking about how to make your tank stable. Stable, everyone talks about stable, stable, stable. And then they put their hands in it every other day and they move corals around and they're always doing stuff. There's very little that might actually necessarily have to be done right now. So what I do is I just keep a list. You can write it on the tank or you can keep it mentally. Don't keep it mentally, you just forget everything. But writing it on the tank's nice, like it's circled, there's a snail here, a vermitid here, there's algae here. And I don't really do that, but you can do that if you want to. And then, you know, every couple, 3 weeks you go in, do everything you need to do and get out, rather than messing with it every day. We want biological filtration, right? Is that still a thing? Do people still talk about biological filtration? Okay, I'm not that far on the outside anymore. It's like a stew. You got to just let it simmer and do its thing. If you keep doing stuff, bad things happen. So I was titling this talk the Rich Ross Reef Recipe, but it's not because I'm a liar. I thought it would be fun because I've been traditionally, that's a bad slide to leave up. I've always said I don't want to give recipes for reef keeping because I don't think they're useful. And I thought it would be good to actually see what is my recipe. So when the Boston Reefers called me and asked me to put this together, I was like, I got a talk I'll put together. And so for like the last month and a half, I've been trying to put this talk together. And I just keep coming around to going, there's no recipe. I don't know how to explain this in another way. But so, like, what kind of reef is the question? But this one says this is what kind of cake. If you're going to make a cake, right? All cakes have flour, eggs, butter, sugar, salt, milk, and baking soda, right? But if you just get those things, that's not going to help you, right? And otherwise, a reef keeping recipe is a book this thick that basically says there's 1,000 choices you have to make about what you believe, right? If you got, you can add water, salt, rock, coral, fish, bacteria, and baking soda. I don't know why baking soda happens to be both in cake and in reefs. Also, it's both in milk, so that's fine. Milk can be in both. That doesn't do you any good. There's more to that. And one of the reasons there's more to that is because if you're making a cake, if you ask them for a cake recipe, the first kind of question is, what kind of cake are you making? Because there's a billion cakes, right? But most of the time when you say, I want to make a reef tank, they say you need this and this and this. And it's like, what kind of reef are you doing? A beginner system is very different than any kind of more advanced system, right? A beginner system, you do the live rock thing. I would do that with everything. Every tank I would ever do, I would get my live rock either from somebody else who's got it already seeded and matured. What was the word we decided was good for that? Seeded, not cooked. Seasoned. I like seasoned. So you got the seasoned live rock. So it's mature. It's got the bacteria that you want it to have to do the job it's supposed to do for you in your tank. And if you've got a beginner system, like I said before, you just do water changes. But are you doing an SPS, a high-end SPS system? It's going to be very different than from somebody who's doing a softy tank or a mixed reef. Or if you're doing a specific ecosystem. If I'm trying to do the inner cove of one of the lagoons in Palau, that's going to be almost nothing like the outer reef of Palau, because the alkalinity is incredibly different between the two, and so is the flow. Do you have a store? We hear a lot of advice from people who have stores or farms, but people who have stores or farms or collector tanks where they have those, candelabra rocks where they put everything out like a fruit stand, which, boy, that sounds negative, but it's not. There's a million ways to reef, and I think you should reef the way you like to reef. That's going to be very different from somebody who's trying to make what has become now known as an old school tank, which is trying to make an ecosystem that survives, which still sees to me that's the point. You want an ecosystem and watch how everything interacts and grows. But if you're trying to make money and grow things as quickly as you can so you can chop them into one polyp and sell them, that's a totally different mindset. You do care about the 10% difference a higher phosphate level might give you in growth. So you do want to bring that down. But if you're just keeping it because you like your tank, you shouldn't really care about a 10% difference in growth. Fish only tank, also different. Predator tank, different. A mega reef tank, 10,000, 20,000 gallons or more, that's a whole different beast. And one of the reasons I had issues with the big tank at the academy was because we couldn't do water changes. Because doing a water change on a 200,000 gallon tank means you need 100,000 gallons of water to do a 50% water change, and that's very difficult to come by. Is the tank going to be set up short term? If you're just keeping it for a little while and flipping it around, you don't need to do a lot of stuff. And if you're breeding, maybe you need to set it up differently as well. You certainly need different aquascapes. Unless you're breeding coral, then it's just a reef tank, but not really, because I'm a liar. Don't forget that. So my approach is pretty simple. Live rock, lots of flow, good light, let it simmer. Don't add stuff too quickly. Use herbivores to deal with algae. Don't be adding a whole bunch of stuff all the time. Don't chase numbers. Chase a range. I don't really care that much about trace elements, although I do add a little. I think we talk about this in the talk. I like there to be some of everything, but I'm not going to chase them all and try to figure out which one is making my blue a little more blue. I just don't care. If you care, do that. But I think the bulk of reef keepers don't care about that stuff. They just want a nice tank that they can play with and mess with and grow stuff in. And you can do that without getting all insane. So my system is based on a simple approach, but my system is stupid. It's stupid complicated because that makes my life easier, which is weird. My system's distributed all over the house, and I'll show you. And I've leaned very hard into automation, which took me about 8 years to actually lean into automation. The first apex I got was just to turn my halides off when they got too hot, when the tank got too hot, because I didn't trust it, you know. And I had a different timer for everything and different circuits in case something went wrong. And you know, and as time goes by, you start to trust that things work most of the way they're supposed to work most of the time. You know, having everything on a controller, is that a bad idea? Yeah, if something goes wrong, but the percentage of times something goes wrong with that controller is really not very high, despite what you might read on the forums, because mostly people go to forums to complain, which is fine too. But if you think there's 50,000 or 100,000 Apex systems out there, and you're hearing from 100 people a year who have had a problem, your odds are pretty good of it doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Also, stop mucking with it. You know, some of the automated testers, people are cleaning them every day. Well, I guess that's not true. If you clean it all the time, you always have to clean it all the time. If you leave it alone all the time, you can leave it alone all the time. It just depends on how much work you want to do. I suggest doing the work when you're learning, because once you've done the work, you've kind of learned what it takes to do it, and then you can start figuring out what it takes to not do more work and just relax. You know, testing every day for a year, good idea. Testing every day for 5 years, make you crazy. The more complicated your system is, the more you also have to understand the complications of that system, besides just the complications of running a reef tank. Running a reef tank is a lot. When you add, you know, a hobbyist level, which is all we have, control system to it, you have to learn that control system. And that control system comes with its own weird stuff and its own complications. And, you know, I know when my Trident that tests my alkalinity starts dipping out of the blue, that it's probably time to change the reagents. It's not time to crank up my alkalinity addition. You know, if the salinity drops off on the graph, it's time to check the salinity probe, not to dump a bunch of salt in, right? So you've got to learn both of those things. And you want to make it easy for yourself. This is my current system at home. I think this picture was actually taken like 2 days ago. That's the tank. It's a faux built-in, and that's the hallway. I don't know why the hallway's in the picture. This top and this top come completely off. So I get complete access to the top of the tank without a door. There used to be a door there. That's why it's not just wide open. But I just pull that panel off. It's just Velcroed on top. This was going to be temporary, but it ends up working so well. And then I can just get in the tank and do whatever I want. And, you know, those are my lights back there, and those are some bar lights. And, you know, I've got flow all over the place. So I like a Lockland manifold with different ports on it so I can aim flow where it needs to go. And that changes over time. As your corals grow, your flow has to change. So that's why I did that originally. And it served me pretty well, although it's down fewer lock lines and more other pumps. There's also a shelf, a bookshelf right here. I used to have everything behind the tank. There's a door back there, and it was kind of tight. And, because it was always, don't put your electrical under your tank if you can. Now, I understand I'm talking about stuff that may not be possible when you buy, you know, a system that's got the sump underneath and you're ready to go and it's easy and it's all in one place. But some concepts are really helpful. If the first version of this tank had a canopy, and I put all the electrical on top of the canopy because water goes down. That fire I showed you, that was because water goes down and there was electrical under the tank and it burned down. But then I had this thing here and I realized I could make it into a cabinet that would open. Let's see if that works. So this is when I was building it, and there you go. Right? So it looks, and everything in here is going to look terrible because it's under construction. But I put all the electrical on that side, and then you close the cabinet and it all goes away. So a cabinet on the side of your tank, that's an easier way to do it. I just like to make things stupider. And that's kind of, oh, it's a dark picture, I apologize. That's what it looks like inside, and I don't really tack down on in my wires, right? First of all, no one sees this. I kind of bundle the wires with hair clips just to kind of keep them out of the way. But a hair clip, if I need to do something, I squeeze it and I can get right at the wires. If I had to unzip tie or unvelcro or pull stuff out of a tube to be able to know what it was, I'd go crazy. And like I say, nobody sees it. And don't get shamed by not having the most beautiful, perfect tank. Are you a feng shui tank person, or are you a reef keeper? Is the equipment more important than the animals? If it is, that's fine. But just because some people think that doesn't mean we all have to think that. I have 2 apexes running. One runs the spawning lab, or the secret lab, and one runs the tank. They're stupid complicated because there's wires going all over the house, and I like lots of modules. I really only check 3 or 4 things with any regularity. Most of it is just there, clicking away, doing its job, what it's supposed to do, monitoring what it's supposed to monitor. It looks complicated, but I know what everything is and where it is and what it does. And a lot of the things like these things that show how fast a motor's running, that's really just there to break up the apex. So I know under that one, that's where everything goes. But mostly, I put everything I care about up here, because on the phone, that's where it shows up first. And then the second most important stuff goes here and here, and the second 2 columns, because that's at the top when you are looking at it on a computer. This is my Trident. I had the original Trident. Actually, I had the pre-Trident that just did alkalinity, and that made me so happy because really all I cared about on it is alkalinity. Because I've tied a calcium reactor into the alkalinity, so it's not just pH, it's an alkalinity device. That's what I think a calcium reactor really is. At the beginning of reef keeping, calcium was an issue and we had problems keeping it up. Modern reef keeping really don't have a problem keeping it up. By the way, the range for calcium is anywhere from 380 to 500. That's a huge range. So if your calcium shoots up to, 450 and it used to be 420, who cares? It's not enough to make a difference. And then I got the Trident NP just because, really just because. Like I said earlier, my tank has traditionally been really high on phosphate and nitrate. Like at one point it was 3 phosphate. Not 0.3, not 0.03, 3. And my nitrate was like 70. And everything was fine. It didn't matter. And I did a presentation about that, and people think I'm crazy and are chasing the 10% they might get in growth or color from that. And that's fine. Chase whatever you want. I think you'll enjoy your hobby more if you get less caught up in the ends of the spectrum of what is possible. If you like living on the bleeding edge of the hobby, live there. But don't feel like you have to live there. There's a lot of the hobby that's a lot easier than people make it. But the Trident NP is pretty great because I can track. I don't want to test phosphate daily or weekly. This machine does it now, and it's kind of nice. Let's see, what to talk about first. I started doing auto water changes about 5 years ago because I had the realization that all of our filtration methods are an excuse to not do water changes. I think we all got excited by Walter Addy and the idea of have a reef tank that you never touch, and it's like one of those balls with the shrimp in it, and you never look at it or have to do anything, and it's self-feeding, and that's exciting and sexy, but I don't think it works yet. Maybe one day we'll figure it out. My phosphate, thank you. It's really low now. So I started doing the auto water changes and dosing lanthanum chloride into my skimmer at a very low dose, like a super low dose. What is the low dose? It's like 30 mil mixed into 3,000 mil of water, dosed at 60 mil a day. I don't even know what that means. It's a lot of numbers. And the idea was if there was an easy way to dose the lanthanum, because lanthanum can do bad things, or there's reports of it doing bad things if you overdose it. If I dose it easily and it exports easily and it doesn't change things radically but slowly over time, sure, I'll do it. If it's easy, cheap and easy and effective, I love it. cheap and easy and makes me feel like I'm doing something, I like that too. So I started dosing that, and then I started doing the water changes for those two reasons. Also, there was the worry that in my tank, the phosphate was so high that there's phosphate in all the substrate and in all the rocks, and it's going to take forever to come out. And what I actually found over the last 5 years of doing it is, yeah, for the first 3 years, the phosphate just stayed the same. And then I started raising the dosing a little bit and started doing the water changes. The auto water changes, I do about 8 liters a day, and the whole system's about 500 gallons now. So you do that conversion. Within 2 years, the nitrate started to come down. It's never been this low. This is crazy. But it was coming down. So it's like, okay, the water changes are good for that quick. Then the phosphate started to come down. You know, it was at about 1.7 for a long time. Then it was like at 1.2 for a long time. And then it was like 0.9 for a long time. And then it started going faster. And so what I've learned is that, okay, let me phrase that a different way. I went away for a couple of weeks, and the auto feeder that feeds the tank pellet food and powdered food and flake food ran out, and I didn't pay attention. And so I came home, and it was getting fed less frozen food because I was away. I came home, my NO3 was like 4, which is insane for me, and my PO4 was 0.11, which is ridiculously low for me again. I fed some frozen food for a couple days and went up just a little bit. So it's really nice. The auto tester is nice for seeing the immediate results or the results over time. And then I added the dry food back in, and the phosphate went back up to 0.2 where it's supposed to be. And the NO3 started coming up as well. On the regular Trident, the calcium and the magnesium I almost never look at. So I don't care if these numbers bounce up and down. They're always right about here. You know, I like my magnesium to be a little higher, but if I don't raise it, nothing bad happens, so who cares? And like I said, with calcium, I don't pay attention. Although once I was out of town, I was out of the country, and my salinity was crashing, and it looked like a real salinity crash. And one of the ways that I found out that it really was by checking the magnesium, because the bulk of the magnesium is actually chloride, which shows up in this test. So if your magnesium is going down and your salinity is going down, your salinity might be going down. But that's a stupid thing to have one of these units for, right? Don't get one of these units in case that ever happens to you, because it's such a rare thing, and you don't have a stupid system like mine. You have your own stupid system that does its own stupid things that you have to figure out what it does. The alkalinity is what I care about the most, but like I say, it's between 8 and 9. I'm happy. If it shoots up to 9.5, it stops dosing on the calcium reactor, which is freaking great. You don't have to really dial in your calcium reactor the same way we used to. The machine keeps it in line. I did have a problem. Everything dropped to 5.7 alkalinity. It stayed down there for a week. The only thing that died was original purple monster, which deserves to be dead. Everything else was fine. So I'm thinking now, after doing this for a long time, that there's something else going on when people blame swings for problems in their tanks, or there may be something else going on. They may not have let the stew simmer enough for it to actually be a delicious stew. They're tasting it before they've added enough salt. My analogies are dumb. This is under my house. My sump is under the house in a 40-inch crawl space. Did I tell you I'm stupid? Yes. It's been like that for 20 years. You want to talk about making things easy? There's a 180-gallon sump over here, and I originally was like, I'll grow frags in there. Very quickly going into a crawl space to look at your frags becomes unfun, even with the puzzle mats on the floor. This is a complete mess right now because I'm changing everything, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but this is in the middle of the change. But what have I got here? I've got a calcium reactor, I've got a skimmer, cheap and easy, and it seems to produce goo, so that seems like a good thing to take some of the goo out. Calcium reactor is an alkalinity reactor. I think that's important if you're doing SPS. I've got a caulk reactor here that cost me $30 to build, and it's the backup to the calcium reactor. If I'm out of town and the calcium reactor borks and something comes loose or runs out of CO2, I can up the calcium additions, the alkalinity additions from the caulk reactor. That's the only reason I have the caulk reactor. It is nice they both kind of help each other so one isn't doing all the heavy lifting. And what else is under there? This is just water holding, and then this is just stupidity of lines running everywhere to move water from place to place, pretty much. That's really it. I grow some algae because somebody said I should grow some algae. I cared for a little while, and then I realized I was starting to add stuff to grow the algae. And when I'm not an algae farmer, and if I'm not growing the algae, everything's fine. So why am I doing it? So I might pull the algae. Although it's cheap and easy, so maybe it's a hedge against something. Oh, there's also a remote deep sand bed back there somewhere. It's a 20-gallon tank filled with sand. That's super cheap and easy. Is it doing anything? It's there because I don't think having 8 inches of sand in my tank makes me happy as a view. Why this has been torn up is because this is a lot of stuff that makes my system go. And it was under the house. And because it was under the house, I was less likely to check on it to make sure it was working properly. So I moved it all outside into a cabinet and drilled more holes in my house. I'm not afraid to drill holes in my house. It's my house. And turns out fixing holes in your house is actually really easy. It's not that hard. Drill holes in the floor, a little harder if you have a hardwood floor. I suggest doing what I did and cut it in the shape of a heat register. So when you move out, you can just put plywood under it and put a heat register in it and go, I always like that. But here we go. This is my DI. I don't run RODI because usually my TDS is about 30. So I don't feel the need to have the complications of a RODI machine or device. This is the pre-filters. And I do that because we have copper pipe. So if you have copper pipe, I want it to take out the copper. And chloramines. So that goes through here, and then it goes to the top off or the calc reactor or the bog or whatever it's feeding. This is a GAC, granular activated carbon. I'll try to change that every 2 months. I think we're going to start changing that every month. Now that it's out here and much easier, tell them I told them never to call me here. I would run it every 2 months because it's probably doing something. And then what have we got here? This is auto change to a frag tank that's under the house as well. This is the auto water change to the whole system. This is caulk. You can see it goes down here. No, that's lanthanum. This one is caulk. So it goes into the crawl space, comes out of the crawl space, and goes back into the house. And I forget what these are. One of these is to my pitcher plant bog, and the other is a freshwater top off, I think, to the cube. I haven't gotten around to labeling all these yet, so I don't know what they're doing. But now I go outside and I need to change these. I just open the cabinet and everything's right here. I'm not ducking. I can look at the cartridges and make sure they're good. If I need to swap one out, click, click, it's swapped out. Just life is easy. So now I'll end up doing regular yearly. I would like to change these once a year. And now it's just easier to do. So make it easy. I'm so happy about this. I can't even tell you. And it's quiet. I thought it was going to bug the neighbors, but all the noise from these pumps in this little metal cabinet doesn't spread around. Another thing, if you have a calcium reactor, I suggest to make your life easy is put it on a scale. Digital scale is about $40, and you can get one that plugs in, not just battery. And every bottle comes with a tare weight, so you write that down. You tare the scale, you put the bottle on, and you'll see that the 20-pound bottle probably only has 12 to 15 pounds of CO2 in it, because the man is screwing us. And then you know how much it weighs, and you watch it come down in weight, right? So I know I have 35 pounds left in that one when I left. It wasn't like, is it picking it up and going, is it light, right? Because as the CO2 comes out, the canister gets lighter. And I was like, oh, I can go away for a month. I've got probably a month's worth. I like big water, and I cannot lie. This is a guy named Bob who brings me water. He collects the water off of Half Moon Bay, filters it, and brings it to the house. I'm telling you, this is so stupid. And then I have a 500-gallon container outside the house. My wife says she loves me. It says Wakita on it because I like the movie Twister. And Bob parks out there and pumps the water in. And then I pump the water into a 200-gallon tank under the house, and that's where the water pulls from. I like this because I always like to have at least a 50% water change on hand all the time. If something goes bad, you're probably going to do a big water change. You know, I don't have a huge backyard or a lot of space, but I was able to tuck this thing in right there. And that's the other reason everything goes under the house. People in other parts of the country have huge spaces in their yard. They could do all kinds of stuff that would make me completely jealous. John Go is building a whole huge shed in his yard to do this kind of stuff, and it's great because then he can go in a room and do it. For some reason, here's another picture of under my house. Making things easy in coral spawning. For 3 months of the year, you've got to stop ambient light from getting into the tank when the cycle of moon and sun is dark, right? So the problem is you shift the time so the spawn happens not at midnight, and so the tank gets dark at 4 p.m., but the regular sun doesn't go down until 5 or 6 p.m. So I used to have to run in there every day and close it up so that the ambient light wouldn't get in there. And now I have an automatic shade, so it does it by itself. And it seems like a stupid little thing, you know, oh, I could just go in and close it and open it. But man, oh man, is it better for me not to have to worry about that? If I could have an automatic, oh my God, it's Bob Stark. Happy birthday to you. Oh my, I haven't seen him in 2 years.
I'm on 50-hour imaging.
So that goes up and down by itself, and when I go to do it, I can tell Alexa to open it or close it by itself. It was great to do it by hand for the first 10 years, and it's so much nicer not to do it that way now. By the way, these are baby corals that are settled. This is a little urchin that's about the size of my pinky nail, and we use the urchins to keep the algae down, because scraping algae off around a 1 millimeter coral polyp is not only a pain in the ass, excuse my language, pain in the bootay, but you can often end up killing the coral by accident because it's so small, you're in a microscope with tweezers. I think it's the same with your reef tank. You know, if you can get the right mix of herbivores, which always changes, by the way, your tank is always dynamically changing in that kind of way. You find the kind of herbivores that work, and you keep them topped off, you do a lot less work pulling algae or dealing with pests that you don't want to deal with. This is the system for raising coral spawn in my laundry. My wife says she loves me. I'm telling you. She says she loves me. I'm doing this a little differently this year. I used to do it just with a peristaltic pump in and out, but I don't think that's enough water turnover for the amount of food that I'm feeding. So now this is a full-fledged system. One of the things I did, I had to go under the house and run like 60 feet of 1.5-inch tubing for the drain and 60 feet of tubing to get, of 3/4 to get the pump to come in here. Really excited about it. When spawning's not happening, these become the end of my end of the line system. The water change water goes into there, and then that drains into drain. And then if I have to QT something or I get a new animal that I think looks funky, it just goes in there. And I've got I don't have to do anything to it because it's getting water, and it's sequestered. However, I don't believe in mechanical filtration, but for the spawn, I'm going to filter. These are 3 20-inch canisters. I'm going to go from 200 micron with a rope filter, which I've never used before. I'm kind of excited about that, and a 200 and a 20 micron and a 5 micron, because after everything settles, you get a survivor issue, and I think that's got to do with gooey stuff in the water and with stuff that eats the gooey stuff in the tank with the babies. Feed, our animals have mouths, and And I think anything with a mouth needs to be fed, otherwise it probably wouldn't have a mouth. Even though it gets energy from photosynthesis, where our corals come from, where the SPS come from, the water is rarely clear. It's always full of crap. Sorry, gooky. Gooky? Gooky? Gooky's not a word. This is the amount of feed I normally feed to the main tank, not to anything else, plus whatever it gets from the auto feeders. I was going to say, I said earlier, probably the thing people get on me a lot now instead of phosphate, is that I don't think phosphate and nitrate are responsible for excess algal growth. And this is why. Algae is really good at life. It can live in the gutter and still grow. It doesn't care about the algae, about the salinity. It doesn't care about anything except maybe temperature and light. And what it does need in the terms of nitrate and phosphate, it scavenges very quickly and is really, really low, right? On wild reefs, they get less than 0.2 ppm of nitrate, less than 0.2. And algae grows. There's algae all over the reef, by the way. That's why there's herbivores that live there. If there was no algae, the herbivores wouldn't be there. You wouldn't see big schools of tangs and snails and fish and all the herbivores you don't see. And 0.03 of phosphate on wild reefs. And that's the high levels. So an algae grows gangbusters. So you can't lower your nitrate and phosphate lower than what the algae needs without killing all your corals, because the corals need more nitrate and phosphate than your algae needs. In this video, let me see if I get this right. The cat is the corals, the food is the nutrients, and the duck is algae. And I can get a sip of this. So that's my hour-long talk about algae in 30 seconds. Fight me. The other thing I was talking about was the time to think about disaster situations for your aquarium is now. Now this depends, there's all levels of disaster preparedness. This is stupid, as much of what I do does. It just makes me happy to do stupid, crazy things. If you have a smaller tank, you can now get these EcoFlow. Have you seen these? They're all-in-one battery backup systems. The EcoFlow is turning out to be really excellent for aquariums because it automatically switches to utility power when the power comes back on. And you can get them in all different sizes and plug in the important things, what you decide is important for your tank. And you figure out how much wattage that takes and how long of a power outage you're worried about. And buy the one. They're like $100 for one that'll run, like a 5-watt propeller pump for 2 days, So I can't believe we got 5-watt propeller pumps now. It used to be the Ampmaster 3K, which pulled 12 watts. 12 amps, excuse me. And so in my case, I decided to let the Apex do a whole bunch of stuff for power. Because it can monitor power and then turn things off and on. And so to do that, I had to lay out what my Apex actually did, which was really annoying to me. But what that let me figure out was, where do I need battery power? And from my battery, did I show the battery? Yeah, this is, I don't have to go over there. I love this. This is a 200 amp hour battery. And this is what's called an MPP. It's basically the control head for it. And this is the most simple thing. It's almost plug and play off the shelf. I didn't even have to wire plugs to it. The only thing I had to wire was utility power. Otherwise, it just worked. And it's got 4 out plugs on the side, so it's great. So what I've done is I put extension cords into those plugs and run them to where I want to power stuff in an emergency. And that's what it looks like. And it's that easy. So mostly what I decided to do is have EB832s keep the power in an emergency and everything else go out without power. So anything I care about is on an EB832 in a certain area of the house. If you care about this on Reef Beef, we talked about it, and it is less complicated than it looks, and you only want to do this if you have an apex and you have a big silly system, a distributed silly system. But it works great. And my system will pull about 400 watts when there's a problem. Some of the pumps drop to 50% instead of what they're normally run, so I can extend the time. I don't put heaters on it. I've got some non-DC pumps that were important that I'm trying to replace over time. But this will run my system for about 8 hours. I mean, it's in California, so the temperature doesn't really drop that fast. 8 hours is pretty good. We almost never have power outages. We have them, they last for about 4 hours anyway. Still, I'm thinking, oh God, I should get 2 more batteries if they're on sale. Triple the time. And if there's an earthquake, we might not have stuff for 3 days. But do I care about my tank then? I don't know. Anyway, I made all of this into an equation, which explains how to reef. And I need to thank these people, especially Fair Use Laws and my bride. And for more information, I've got a lot of stuff on packedhead.net, and there's also the podcast, Reefkeeping podcast. If you want to check that out, there's a lot of info in those as well. So I'll say thank you for your time and your attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now or later on in the day. So thank you very much.